Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, 5 takeaway series. This jam-packed video. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. So the first takeaway, Zach Charbonnet really had a huge game. 22 carries, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 7 catches for 59 yards on 7 targets. He dominated snaps and routes run. We did see a little bit of Kenny McIntosh, but he only played to give Charbonnet a breather. I mean, how much more could we ask for than 29 touches, almost 200 total yards, and 2 touchdowns? Charbonnet actually had more targets in this game than both JSN and DK Metcalf. So he was a workhorse. He was an elite fantasy asset for this week. Now, Kenneth Walker missed this game with ankle and calf injuries. First of all, I'm not confident that Walker's going to play week 15. The Seahawks are still in contention, so I do think Walker comes back. Is it next week? Not sure. I'm also not confident that Walker's just going to waltz right back in to the workhorse role upon his return. He was seeing a little bit of a decline in efficiency, a little bit of a decline in work. He hadn't had this kind of game like Charbonnet had all season, and Walker's injury may continue to limit him. So I'm a little bit concerned about Kenneth Walker. Now, what do you do here? I dislike this situation. I've disliked it since the day Zach Charbonnet was drafted, because Kenneth Walker is a really good running back. He's better than Zach Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet is a starting caliber running back. I'd say top 25. He should be a starter. So this is a problem because Walker has struggled in 2024. He's been okay. I mean, 10 games, 145 carries, 542 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3.7 yards carry, and 38 catches for 271 yards and a touchdown. Walker has almost doubled his receiving volume from 2023 and has 7 touchdowns on just 145 carries. I don't think that's sustainable. And he's continued to decline in rushing efficiency from 2022 to 2024. As for Charbonnet, he hasn't been quite as involved in terms of volume, and most of it's come in the games he started with Walker out. 97 carries, 400 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4.1 yards a carry, and 36 catches for 263 yards and touchdown. Been a bit more efficient than Walker, but on more limited touches. Again, I think Charbonnet is a starting level running back. But what's not going to continue is 74 total receptions for running backs in this backfield. I don't believe that's continuing. And another thing that's definitely not going to happen is 14 rushing touchdowns when Geno Smith only has 14 passing touchdowns. That's not going to continue either. So I'm kind of interested in selling both players. I'm not really interested in buying either one. Kenneth Walker, I would take a 25 first for him in Superflex. And then I did see this for Zach Charbonnet. Maybe Keon Coleman, who I still do believe in long term. We saw that he was really good when he played. And I just think Zach Charbonnet, when Kenneth Walker comes back, Zach Charbonnet is going to go back to being the backup. And we're going to want him to start, but he's not going to. So this is a good opportunity maybe to sell low on Kenneth Walker and sell high on Zach Charbonnet. Now, second takeaway, Sam Darnold and the Vikings offense erupted. Vikings, big 42-21 victory over the Falcons. They go to 11-2. Darnold, 22 of 28 for 347 yards, 5 touchdowns. He averaged 12.4 yards per 10. Did not turn the ball over. Signature game from him. And he delivered for the fantasy weapons. Jordan Addison, 8 catches, 133 yards, 3 touchdowns on 12 targets. If you started him, you probably won. And then Justin Jefferson, 7 catches, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 7 targets. Not used to seeing Addison get more volume than Jefferson, but this was also a massive game. A week-winning type of performance. And then TJ Hawkinson, 4 catches, 5 yards on 5 targets. I do think he'll get a little bit more involved. I do like that even though the wide receivers both absolutely had monster games, that Hawkinson wasn't a total dud, and only 4 targets went to other players. So this is an absolutely concentrated receiving pecking order, which allows all 3 players to have some value. Now, what do you do with this team? For me, I think this is a good moment to get out from Sam Darnold. I'm okay selling him, both looking at this year and next year. His 3 playoff matchups, Bears, Seahawks, and Packers, it's not super exciting. And there was a report earlier on Sunday saying the Vikings are not negotiating a long-term deal with him. It makes sense. They're committed to J.J. McCarthy. And I am not sure that Sam Darnold would just have the same success away from all of these offensive weapons without Kevin O'Connell's magical offensive system. Every quarterback who plays under Kevin O'Connell succeeds. Will Sam Darnold be the same elsewhere? I don't think so, because he wasn't the same elsewhere, anywhere else. So for me, if you could get 25 first for Darnold in Superflex, I'd take it, because 25 first is going to gain value. We don't know where Sam Darnold's going to sign in free agency. I'm not sure people are going to like it. So I would take that. But it's going to cost a 25 first. I mean, I'm not going to sell for less. So that would be what I would have to get if I'm selling Sam Darnold, especially if I'm not in the playoffs and my trade deadline is still open. I would absolutely sell Sam Darnold in that case. Takeaway 3. Puka Nacua is elite. Now, you might say, well, this is not news. But I do think Puka Nacua was still not valued correctly. He was the difference in the Rams' 44-42 victory over the Bills. And he was the entire offense. 12 catches, 162 yards and touchdown on 14 targets, 5 carries for 16 yards and touchdown. He had 14 targets on 26 routes run and the carries. He was targeted over half the time he ran a route. 26 routes run is not even that many. But Nacua still dominated. It didn't matter. The Rams even went to him as a rusher despite having Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, who they're both getting involved. I think at this point, we have to accept that Puka Nacua is elite. He's young. And I think he should be the Dynasty wide receiver 4 behind Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Malik Neighbors. That's where I would have Puka Nacua. Now, what is actionable here? I think it's too late to buy Puka Nacua. But I would consider selling Cooper Kupp, especially if you miss the playoffs. Look, Kupp had a good game. 5 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown, and 8 targets. But if something happens to the quarterback, Matthew Stafford, I mean, he might go away at some point. I don't think Kupp at this stage in his career is as quarterback proof as Nacua. When both are playing, there is no doubt, 0, that Nacua is the wide receiver 1 in the offense, not Kupp. Who are they designing plays for? Who is getting carries? Who has the target share? It's all in favor of Nacua. I'm not saying that Kupp can't produce, but there's no competition for wide receiver 1. It's 1 and 2, not 1A and 1B. So Cooper Kupp turns 32 in June 2025, and we see it with basically every wide receiver. Once you hit 32, that's it. That's usually done. You start to see a fall off. I'm not saying you can't still produce. Davante Adams is still fine. He's still okay. But are you winning your league behind Davante Adams? No. So you're going to see a decline in production as we move forward with Cooper Kupp, especially if Puka Nacua does stay on the field for the entire season. The value of Cooper Kupp is not going to increase during the offseason. That's not going to happen. Now, some people say I put unrealistic trades on here. This was in the Dynasty Daddy trade database. You sell Cooper Kupp for Marvin Harrison Jr. Some are going to say, well, it's not realistic. No, I don't think it's realistic in most leagues. But it goes to show you that you should aim high on trades. Why not try? You never know. Yes, it's not going to happen in most leagues. But this was in there. So it did happen in a league. Now, more realistic. You might not even have to add the 25 to this, but could you sell Cooper Kupp for something like Jaden Reed? More realistic. Reed has been struggling lately, no doubt. And I do think he's a good buy low because I have not lost faith in his talent. He didn't become bad. He's 7 years younger than Kupp. And realistically, if we're talking about an asset heading into the offseason, if we're not competing, who would you rather have? Jaden Reed or Cooper Kupp? I think I would rather have Jaden Reed as, an offseason asset over soon to be 32-year-old Cooper Kupp. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon right now. If you use the code TylerYT, you get a 50% discount off your first month at all tiers. You get my rankings, start, sit, Dynasty, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. And in the Discord, there are access to my Patreon-only videos and also my premium articles, write-ups type stuff that I do for patrons. Tiers begin at $6 a month, include all of that, but with that 50% discount, begins at $3 a month. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my Why You Should Join the Patreon videos on the channel. And I do appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. I will say, as we head into the offseason, there will be, especially maybe in January and February, a reduction in YouTube content. I will still produce some public YouTube content, but I think the majority of my content will come for patrons only during that period of time. We will still see the public YouTube content more so during more peak periods of time, like free agency, the NFL draft, and of course, in season. With that said, we'll get into my next takeaway. So takeaway number 4 is that Braelon Allen, kind of disappointed. I don't think he's going to be the league winner that you wanted. But my stash call I did on this channel, I suggested stashing Isaiah Davis, who outproduced Braelon Allen. I also had Stephen McCormick as another one of my stashes. It was a good week for me on that video. You can and should still watch it. It's on the channel. But moving on, Allen had 11 carries for 43 yards, 4 catches for 38 yards and 5 targets. And Isaiah Davis had 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown on 3 catches, 27 yards on 6 targets. The two running backs had almost identical carries, routes run, and played within 1 snap of each other. There were a few 2 RB sets, which pushes the value of both running backs up. But this was a dead even 50-50 committee. It's not even what I expected. I expected to see Allen be used at the goal line in short yardage situations, Davis to come in passing situations. That's not what happened at all. It was a dead even swap in, swap out, 50-50 playing time split in all situations. So Davis actually exceeded all of my expectations. And it makes it tough. I mean, how are you going to start these guys moving forward? Now, what do? Usually I have a buy sell recommendation. In this case, I'm not really interested in buying low on Breece Hall. He's still too expensive for me. Maybe you could sell Breece Hall, but that's hard to do now. I would wait for him to come back and then sell him. As for selling Allen after this game, I don't think Allen is bad. So I don't think you're getting enough for Allen. I'm not interested in paying a pick to acquire Davis. But if Davis is somehow still on your waiver wire, you should spend the rest of your fab to get him. Because running backs with talent should never, ever, ever be on Dynasty waiver wires. Ever. Especially if they're young with a chance to gain value. We see injuries at running back happen all the time. Opportunities open up all the time. Running backs that are young and talented should not ever be on a Dynasty waiver wire. As for if you have Davis already, I'm okay selling him for a 25 third. Otherwise, I just hang on to him. I'm not in a rush to sell someone like Davis if I'm not getting a real return. Last takeaway. And I feel like I talk about the 49ers offense on here constantly, but there's just so much to talk about on that team. Brock Purdy and the 49ers offense revived itself. I put Brock Purdy as a buy on my Wednesday video, and I am begging people, this comes up all the time, to stop penalizing players for games they are obviously not healthy and play through injuries when if they just sat out, no one would care. If you put Brock Purdy in your lineup in the snow game last week and he killed you, that is on you. He was obviously not healthy. He was limited in practice all week. He was injured, and you played him in a blizzard. That is your fault. You could have benched him, but you didn't. But of course, this week, he's a full go in practice. There was no blizzard. Practiced in full, was no longer injured, looked fully healthy, and mysteriously, he was back to the near elite passer he's been his entire career, which doesn't shock me at all. He went 20 of 25 for 325 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 5 carries for 11 yards. He averaged 13 yards an attempt, and he managed to succeed despite the injuries to CMC, Jordan Mason, and then another injury to Isaac Guerendo, which has not helped. We've talked about this a lot. Purdy's going to get a massive contract in the offseason. Value him in Superflex leagues appropriately. Now, I do think something was interesting here, though. Jauan Jennings had 7 catches, 90 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 8 targets. He's dominated since Ayuk went down. He's 100% a part of the 49ers 2025 plans because they have him under a bargain contract. That's going to be one of the best deals they've ever made. And right now, he's the top wide receiver on the 49ers by a lot. It's not going to change. Jennings is ahead of Deebo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall. That's not going to change anytime soon or ever. George Kittle was great too. 6 catches, 151 yards on 6 targets. Spent a lot of time blocking. Took advantage of the removal of CMC from the target tree. I do find that. I find that Kittle is far better with CMC out than CMC in. And those saying, I hear some people saying, oh, well, they can't afford to keep Kittle. They're out of their minds. George Kittle is going to be on the 2025 49ers because he's their most critical offensive weapon overall. If you count his blocking in addition to his receiving, he is still the heart of that team. So he's not going anywhere. Now, as for someone who is going somewhere, Deebo Samuel, 2 catches for 22 yards on 3 targets and 5 carries for 13 yards. Nothing. He did nothing in either phase of the game. Jauan Jennings is the wide receiver 1 right now. It's not going to change. Jauan Jennings is ahead of Deebo Samuel and Ricky Pearsall, and that's not going to change. Deebo Samuel looks totally washed. Ricky Pearsall, not better. 1 catch for 5 yards on 2 targets. You know, it's his best game in 4 weeks. The last 3 were goose eggs. He might serve as the wide receiver 3 next year behind Ayuk and Jennings, but I'm not even sure that the 49ers can trust him in that role with Ayuk's injury. I'm very nervous about Ricky Pearsall. I just haven't seen anything that I've liked at all. Isaac Guerendo was great. 15 carries, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 catches for 50 yards before exiting with foot injury. Played most of the snaps before his injury. Ran 17 routes. Got more involved in the passing game than Jordan Mason had. Guerendo looked great. We're going to have to see how severe the injury is, though, before we do any moves. Now, What am I looking to do? It's get rid of Deebo Samuel. People hear the name Deebo Samuel and they think explosive league winner. No. Over the last 4 games, he has 11 catches for 85 yards. Not in one game, in all of them. 6 carries for 12 yards. Yes, some of that came with Braelon Allen and in the snow. But Jauan Jennings faced those same conditions and has more than double the catches, more than triple the receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Samuel's been bad all year. 40 catches for 553 yards, touchdown, 32 carries, 92 yards, and touchdown on the ground. Career low in catches and receiving yards per game. Career low in yards per attempt as a runner. The unsustainable touchdown luck he had in 2021 and 2023 has completely evaporated. And despite CMC being out and Ayuk being out, Deebo has done nothing. He looks finished, and I'm not interested in Dynasty for him anymore. Whether he's on the 49ers or a new team, I'm done. I'm done with Deebo Samuel. Completely done. You can tell him and Kyron Williams for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would do that in a second. And then this one, you'd add him to Mike Evans for Rome Odunze in 25 seconds. If you're not competing, do it. Get rid of these players, especially Deebo Samuel, because I'd honestly rather have Mike Evans in Dynasty. I think Mike Evans has more left than Deebo Samuel if I had to pick between the two. All right, let's get into NFL news real quick. Jonathan Brooks, and this sucks. He retore his ACL, same ACL on the only carry of the game. It's devastating. I don't expect him to come back for all of 2025 because it's so late in the year. Re-injury of the same knee. I think we'll see him for the next time in 2026. He's lost the majority of his dynasty value. I don't want people to learn the wrong lesson here, though. We can't just dismiss every injured player because this one didn't work out. So I just want to note that. As for Chuba Hubbard, he's been great, but mostly in the beginning of the season, he's starting to slow down a little. If you could get a 26 first for Hubbard, I still would. I still would sell him for this. I'm just not that interested in Chuba Hubbard long term. Aidan O'Connell, knee injury. It's not as severe as it originally looked. He's back up. Maybe he'll return. Desmond Ridder may finish out the season. And if he does, it'll hurt Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. I guess you should pick up Ridder in deeper superflex leagues, but I'm just not that interested. We should hope for Bowers and Myers that O'Connell can come back because Ridder is so much worse than O'Connell. Last piece of news, Derek Carr, fractured hand. I think it's season ending. Given that the Saints situation and Carr's $30 million injury guarantee, if he gets severely hurt for next year, whoever starts for the Saints is unplayable, whether it's Hainer or Rattler. So are all weapons on the team other than Alvin Kamara. Carr's also in concussion protocol, which doesn't help. I don't expect to see Chris Olave the rest of the year now that Carr is hurt. Shaheed and Taysom Hill are done for the year. As for Carr, he's actually been good this year, quietly. 67.7% completion, 15 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, 7.7 yards per attempt, 214.5 passing yards a game. Went 5-5 as a starter. If Carr doesn't miss those 3 games with injury, Saints might have made the playoffs. And this was Carr's best statistical year since 2021. He's 33 years old, turns 34 in March 2025. I don't know. I think that the Saints are not going to get a high-end quarterback in the draft because there are 8 horrible teams with 2 or 3 wins, and they already have 5 wins. I think the Saints have to bring Carr back next year. It's tough to cut him. He has a no-trade clause. I think they bring him back. If a first-round quarterback falls to them in a place they're comfortable with, I do think they take that player and have Carr as a bridge, but their cap situation doesn't align for a free agent signing. So I think Carr comes back to the Saints next year. Now, I've got one Patreon question. What did you make of Michael Myers' box score this Sunday? Fluke or something there? I mean, he was pretty good. 7 catches, 68 yards, and 9 targets. The Raiders played base, 12 personnel. 3 wide receivers saw snaps, and the wide receiver 3, Terrace Marshall, barely played. And I've always felt that Myers kind of got screwed because he was a great prospect drafted by a previous regime and then got thrown overboard for Brock Bowers. Raiders have the second most cap space in 2025, but it's just hard because the cap space means they're going to fill the void at wide receiver left by Devontae Adams, and 2 tight ends on the same team don't produce, basically, ever. So Meyer, unfortunately, is a long-term stash until he's a free agent in 2027. He just can't have regular fantasy value unless Bowers goes down or he's traded away. The type of wide receiver void we've seen after the Devontae Adams trade will not happen again. The Raiders have so much cap space and draft picks. They're going to fill that void. So unfortunately, they're going to be waiting on Michael Meyer. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the YouTube channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty starts at redraft and more. 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. Every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.